down. And I think about being the host and the DJ at the same time. It's amazing. All right. So welcome everybody. My name is Callie. I'm director of Studio 550, and we are here with Riley Watts, Lonnie Stanton, and Emily Beatty for a discussion about space as far as our first component of Digital Live, which is a series that's built off of discussions and workshops centered around digital media and creation and integration of digital media into creation. So to start us all off, I would like to go around and have the artists, panelists introduce themselves. And then after that, we'll just take a look at some work I think Emily and Riley has submitted just to kind of give a better perspective of like where they're coming from. So panelists, just say your name, introduce yourself a little bit about what you're doing, anything that you'd like to share, and then tag the next person. So let's start with Emily.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Callie, and thank you, Riley and Lonnie. I'm so excited to be on this panel and to be a panelist. So about me, I'm based now in Somerville. I am a dancer, choreographer, and educator. My work that I'm making pairs my dance practice with my media practice, and I guess my friendships and relationships with media artists that I work closely with. As far as an educator, I teach physically dance practice. I also teach dance and film and any other hybrid of digital media and movement that I can dream up. And that's about it. That's all I'd like to say for now. Thank you. I'm excited.
How about Lonnie?
Sure. Hi, all. My name is Lonnie Stanton. I am also a dancer and movement educator based in Boston. And in regard, I am thinking around the realms of space right now on this panel. So in regard to making dance, I definitely have a passion and committed interest in bringing dance to public spaces, also known or can be considered site specific. And let's see, the last that I got to do that was in Somerville, actually, during the pandemic, which was a joyous project to attempt because it was in public space, and then also navigating safety and distance and not inviting crowds, which is a different way to approach performance, to avoid the audience and crowd to some degree. So that was an exciting, more recent exploration of site-specific and creating dance in public space. And education-wise, teaching all sorts of modern technique as well as somatic practices around Boston. And I will pass it. I'll pass it to Riley.
Thanks, Lonnie. My name is Riley Watts. I am a dance artist, excuse me, based in Portland, Maine. I have been, for the most of my career, I've been a real sort of a concert dance proscenium kind of performer. And I guess in the last, I don't know, since I moved back to Maine about 5 years ago, I've been taking the openness that the freelance schedule can allow in order to explore different things within the dance arts. So I don't really call myself a choreographer. I call myself a dance artist because I feel like I use dance as the base of everything, and then and dance thinking as the base of everything, and then I sort of go from there with different media. I've sort of I make sculptures, I make video, I make music, I do choreograph. I'm an improviser. That's my main sort of avenue in terms of generating movement, dance material. And then yeah, that's kind of it so far.
Great. Thank you all for that intro. I kind of want to just dive in a little bit to some work. Maybe we can go with you. We'll go backwards on this. We'll share, Riley. You can kind of narrate with us a little bit before the work, and then we'll see the work, and then you'll let me know when we go into the next thing, and I'll do that from this computer. So I'm going to go into screen sharing mode right now, and it's going to turn black, but that's fine.
You have both videos?
Yep. Yep.
Ooh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so I have Ashtung 2 first, but you can start in any order you would want to.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, either one. Should I explain a little bit before? Okay. So I wanted to show 2 different videos that I did last year. I think of them as sort of a pair. They're called Achtung 1 and 2, and Achtung means attention in German. And also it's sort of a, yeah, I think you'll get the feeling of it from when you watch it, but I created it during an arts residency that I was at last year, in the beginning of the pandemic. So I was at this residency. I was living in this space in Rockland, Maine. I was at the Alice Beauregard Foundation, and then the pandemic hit, and I was sort of like left completely by myself at this residency. I had left my apartment in Portland. I didn't have any place to live, so I ended up staying at this residency completely by myself, which was in a very spooky former high school building that had been converted into art studios. And part of the place that I had to work was this I mean, absolutely incredible, spooky, again, I will highlight that word, auditorium that hadn't been used at all for years and years, or barely for years and years. So yeah, it was as I know everybody can understand, it was a real panicky moment. It was a real anxiety-ridden moment. And then also I was sort of there to make work, and I was, you know, sort of very much on my own. So I made the music for these first. I was exploring with video ideas of recording myself in different places, and then doing the choreographing, actually not like really in the space at all, but doing it on the screen. So my choreographic practice was living mostly in the video editing software, and then having like choices in the live space of lights and music and whatever, to kind of be a little bit separated from the actual choreographic process that I would only find out when I put it into the computer, if that makes sense. I also want to say that these do have quite a bit of flashing lights, blinking lights. So if that is, I think you should just be aware of that. And if that's a problem for your eyes or anything, please, you know, look away and just listen to the music or whatever. So yeah, okay. And I'm gonna get my charger. Was that sort of choppy for everybody? Can everyone see that okay? Blurry? A little blurry? Oh, maybe it's just mine. Okay.
That was great. Awesome. So I think before we move on to anybody else, Riley, do you want to discuss, I mean, or just like talk a little bit about, you know, this whole series is based off of digital media. Yeah. So like, how does this relate to that like topic discussion as it relates to space as well? Maybe is kind of a question, maybe prompts to kind of go from those two things.
Well, I think it was like a different, for me, it was a different, like, you know, when you're choreographing, you're typically in the live space, you know, living space with other dancers, real time. And for a couple of reasons, I couldn't do that. One was because I was by myself in this residency without other dancers. which I did want to do initially. And then of course the pandemic happened, so then I really couldn't be there with anybody. And so for me, it was almost like a very intense time of like honing in very, very, very intensely on a solitude, on a space, in a space of solitude, in a forced way because of where we all were at that time. But also I found that it changed the way that I thought. Like, when you have a bunch of people in front of you in rehearsal that you're working with in a live space, there's a different sense of timing that you have to keep in engagement with them. And I've struggled with that in rehearsals, to find like a creative flow when I have like a bunch of people in the room that I need to direct in my choreography, as the Prometheus dancers will remember. And so this way I got to be by myself in the room and design the room and dance as it came up, and then take a way different amount of time and space on my own to get into the kind of flow state that I think is necessary to be creative. It was, I mean, as you might imagine from watching those videos, it was not a particularly healthy place. Like it was, I'm aware that they're difficult to watch. I've heard people respond saying that makes them a bit nauseous with the flashing lights. I'm aware of that effect, unfortunately. I also do believe that art making, even if it's in a digital place, even if it's on a screen, is always a physical thing. And so while I was not necessarily setting out to make people nauseous, it does kind of prove my point that when you're watching something, your body's always involved, and they feel very, I mean, as difficult as they might be to watch and sort of jarring as I know that they are, that is very much how I was feeling inside. Like that's what my brain was doing, having these lights and like flashing, and it was a form of mania, actually, in a very true sense. And yeah, it's so in terms of the space of it, it was just it is what you see. that's what I was feeling like, and that's how the space sort of came out to me in this way, this concentrated digital form. So
Yeah, I could definitely see
I'm a little concerned that the quality of the video, I'm not sure if it was just my computer, the quality of video was a little bit blurry and something. So I'm going to put the link to my Vimeo with those if anyone wants to see them in a more fluid maybe way. I'm not sure if that was just my computer or not, but I'm going to put the links to them in the chat if anyone's curious.
Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, obviously I can't tell. How is it for everybody else? Is there any issues, or does it look okay? Okay, it might be your receiving end of it. Yeah, so that prompts the other question is, let's move through this a little bit, and then we can come back to discussing things later. So I'm going to go to Emily, and then Lonnie, I also want you to eventually talk about your practice as well and your experience. And we don't have any footage to show of Lonnie's, but I think it's worth like giving you a time to just kind of go through your walking thing. But we'll go to Emily first, and then you can have time to think about it a little bit. So Emily, do you want to give like a precursor to what we're going to see?
Sure. So we'll see what comes up. I gave us an order, but if it gets mixed up, then I'll just reintroduce. So what I'm beginning with, I'm doing a couple of stills and a few teasers for some pieces that I created. And I think what I wanted to start with was a piece I was a dancer in. It was a collaborative process with David Rusev. And he's a choreographer that is in Los Angeles. And this image is one of my favorite because it does combine the digital realm and the physical realm. And he was one of the first choreographers that I got to create with and tour with. So I got to learn the piece and get deep into the piece that used digital media repeatedly. In my own work, I didn't get to repeat this as much, so I learned a lot from it. Please, I'll send a link to his work, but I'll speak from my perspective of dancing in the work. So this piece is about, it's a story about a character who is never actually physically present on the stage in the form of a dancer. So nobody was assigned this character. This character's name is Junior. And what I love about this piece is that it's using technology to dream and to have this dream space, which I guess we are kind of always doing, or maybe we're always awake or something. But I love the metaphor that David Rousseff used for that. And then the character's name is Junior, and he really doesn't understand himself yet. He's African-American and queer and trying to figure out his life, and uses technology to experiment, essentially. He texts to unknown numbers all the time, his feelings, and he gets visited by his grandfather, who is his dearest advocate, via Skype. And when he goes into these dream sequences, this art is projected onto the screen. And this is by Carrie Ann Shim-Sham, a wonderful video artist that partnered with David for this piece. So the work is really physical, very demanding work. And speaking about space, I love the fact that each dancer is not Junior or the main character, but yet they portray him. He kind of jumps through our own bodies. So thinking about space in terms of character development, I had never been in a piece like that, where the character was never physically on stage, but you would see a metaphor through the dance. So please check out his work. It's really brilliant, and it was a pleasure to work with him. So that's my first slide. We can go to the next one, which is something that I created. I think it's next slide or video, whatever's there. This should be Antenna. So Antenna is are you good? Okay. Antenna is a collaboration with Brian Knopf, and he's a musician that was an accompanist with me, and then we started collaborating. It's a piece about finding noise, determining noise versus signal. So that's hard to do, and it was a hard piece to do. And let's just watch it. And I can a little bit narrate too. You can hit play, Callie. Short and sweet. Antenna was basically run by my movement and a Kinect camera. We had recordings of my voice that were sped up or slowed down based on how I was moving. The Kinect camera saw my body and was mapped accordingly. We had different phases of it, and it was really fun and difficult to try to find what signal meant, or kind of finding your path through sound and through my movement. So the piece was sections of improvisation, and sometimes the audio found a signal, and sometimes my body, and sometimes neither. But it was really a wild ride. Yeah, so we'll go to the next one, which is, I'll give intro to that, which is Rolling Point. And this is also run with a Kinect camera. And this is a moment when I started using connect cameras with visuals connected to my body. And what you're seeing now is a documentation from a gallery where it was premiered on Stony Brook University campus, and the gallery was called Zucare Gallery. Extremely short and sweet. So I'll explain a little bit about that. The camera was mapped to my body, and I would walk through quadrants that would trigger videos. And it was based off of the square that we're actually trapped in now in this Zoom. So if I walk this way, then the videos are oriented going that way, vice versa, up and down. I really want to get back to that piece. There's many things to change about it. And it's really, really fun piece. And that was a collaboration with Eric Gunther. And the next one, the last piece I wanted to talk about is just images. And this is a big shift in my work. It is called, the piece is called Dance Like No One Is Whale Watching. And it's my first immersive piece. What you're seeing here is, well, the piece is enclosed in a dome. It's an inflatable created by Mary Hale, an amazing architect here in Boston who works with inflatable space. And so it's a dome. So the audience enters the antechamber and then into the main chamber. And the picture before, we were collaborating on this blanket that I'm now laying on. I think Catherine, who's attending, is like dead center in the picture. That's her silhouette. The projections were coming from the outside. And what else about it? Space. So in this one, I was really changing everything. I was proposing that the audience was underwater with me. We used many tactics, theatrical tactics, to get them into that zone. I had to figure out how to perform with the audience very close to me, something that was really new for me. And also with the other characters, and also with the projections, and how to carry the whole show in a convincing way. And then I added audience participation on top of that. This is just another image of part of the piece. This costume is a draped sequin blanket that you saw at the beginning. There's lots of transformations, lots of thresholds that we went through, all in the same circle of space. So I feel like there's the whale has arrived. That's one of the climaxes of the piece. And then we change the space again. It's been this circle. It billows a bit. We change the images that are on it. We change the actions that are coming, that are within it. And then we change actual physical space one time. You can go to the next slide, Kylie. I think this is the right one. There it is. Okay. So we actually changed the top. Some people call that the sixth wall. We changed the ceiling, and I'm able to dance with this fabric, which is a wonderful surprise and another way to keep breaking the barrier and expectations of the audience. So as a maker, thinking about changing space in many different ways as we were creating this, and I kind of continue to hold that with me. Is this the last one, Kelly? Or one more? Okay. This is part of the festival. So this is an image of the downtime in between our performances, when we got to rest, but we could allow the audience to be in this balloon, billowy space where they're working with Connect to make sound and change this little aquatic cell. So that was really popular. People love being inside the bubble. It's a really fun space. We often don't get to be in round spaces that are the walls are round and the ceiling is round. So it made me feel more 3D in all ways. And I realized how square my life is. I meant just physically, I hope. But that's another way to programmatically like change the space and make new rules for the audience to enjoy it. And that's where I'm going to stop there. Oh, my credits. I'll put them in the chat as well, but big credit to David Shev, Brian Knopf, Eric Spencer, Carrie Ann Shimsham, who did the video art with Dance Like No One Is Whale Watching, Mary Hale, and then Eric again. And the photo credits are also there.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Hi. For that. I mean, we want to just pass it on to Lonnie, and then we can kind of like
Great.
powwow after that. And Lonnie, if you need a prompt other than maybe what you're talking about, it's like, I just want to hear from you. I know we were discussing space, and you made this great correlation between space of like digital space and like your public art space that you inhabit, or you like to inhabit as performance. And maybe start with a little bit of like that correlation, because I think it's totally relevant. And I know that like you don't deal with projection, right? You don't want to deal with that, but I think there's a similarity and a parallel we can make somehow.
Thank you, Callie. I must say, the creativity is not flowing at this very moment in regard to, I think just seeing these images of Emily's work, it was interesting because my synopsis were triggering around being in public, actually seeing that. So maybe I'll start talking and see if I can tie it into this digital space. Because it's very true. As much as I adore Callie in my life for many years now, yeah, I don't want to touch buttons. I like living in the projection world with Callie. But that is like definitely the opposite realm of what I'm comfortable in. And when in regard to public space, I think I'd love to just give some love to I worked with a company, Kinesis Project Dance Theater in New York. It's based in New York City and now Seattle, actually, some. But it's a company that is committed to large scale site specific work. And so I would love to give credit in a couple sentences to that experience, because that there were a couple of words that you just said, Emily, like immersive and also circular space, or the proximity to audience, and all of that gets me very excited. And I really got to dive into it with the work of this company, because the work I did was, of course, in parks and on benches and different textures, but we also were at the Rockaways and got to be in buildings that were abandoned due to Hurricane Sandy. And so I was sometimes in spaces that had a lot of weight to it and a lot going on in addition to whatever we were creating as a company and in our art. And that like just sold me, I guess, because there's so much history in any space. And I think it all just clicked for me growing up in the country and then only being trained in classical ballet for most of my youth. And the look past your hand, see the ocean, see above, imagine looking down to a canyon. That might be Limon, excuse me. But all these like wonderful imagery that could be handed to you in dance training. And for me, I think as soon as I was out in spaces and feeling the sand and had the dirt and all of those real things growing up in the country, that was, as an only child, those were my friends, the dirt, the grass, the trees, and some animals. So finally being in spaces like that for enough time, that is why I'm so called to it, is just because it's all right there and it's all real. So maybe doubling back to the few of you that heard me mention cartoons, which I also have trouble, just like projection, feeling anything in. Since I was a kid, I'm not a cartoon person often. I want to see real animals, real people, real things, and feel it. So I think there is an immersive aspect to dancing in public spaces that means a lot to me. And I think it's because boundaries are broken so much, especially when you think in contrast to a proscenium in a concert space. And I was inspired by seeing what I saw from both Riley and Emily again in regard to, like Riley, it was visceral for me. Yes, it was a physical experience to watch you, just even though it was on a screen. And the walls are broken even in a digital space, which keeps surprising me, teaching on Zoom now for a year and seeing Riley with this, even Emily talking with this still image. Experiencing and witnessing both of what was just shared even excites me more than watching dance on a proscenium stage, because I saw Emily reaching for a whale and some random people on the floor. And then I saw lots of lights flashing and sculptures that I already am somewhat aware of in Riley's work right at me, and then shadowed back. And so I guess just the breaking down of walls and the squareness that Emily mentioned is what it's all about for me. And I think the last thing I'll ramble on about creating and dancing in public space is you cannot control anything about the audience to some degree. I have been in site-specific and in public spaces in work where there has been some attempt sometimes from the choreographer or to kind of navigate or imagine that the audience, this is the great angle, this is the best way to see the park and to see these three dancers next to this tree. And at the end of the day, I don't really truly believe in that. And I like the freedom of the audience being able to see it in any way. And I also am immensely interested in people walking by in their commute, and if they stop or if they don't stop, if they're annoyed or they're not. I am so inspired by making the choices around that in any given moment. And I go back to my work with Kinesis because I was able to get such an education doing sometimes the same piece, but on a beach, and then at Battery Park and the base of Manhattan, which is a very different scene of humans that will be in and out of the space you're performing in. And that is also that realness and that challenge and the inevitable improvisational necessity of it all is certainly what interests me, because you're sharing space. And I also don't believe in dancing in public space and attempting to make it your performance space. I don't feel it's my stage or any of the performers' stage. We're sharing space and performing. So what does that also mean? Because you don't get, personally, my interest is not in putting the cones out or putting a temporary stage somewhere. I don't want those barriers. And that's, I think, why I'm so passionate about it. You can make a solo on a bench, and I've done it for weeks, and then that bench won't be there when you're performing because 3 people are sitting there. And for some reason, I love that.
That was awesome, Lonnie. Yeah, I get that. I kind of want to throw it back to whoever. I mean, maybe we can start like bouncing, all panelists kind of bouncing ideas off each other. But I kind of want to focus this, in addition to digital media or space or whatever you want to call it, you also have this live component to performance. There is, there's Riley, you did some things that were pre-recorded, which is talking about control, like trying to figure out where the control lies in that sense, because in essence, you kind of had like all of the control at your fingertips because you didn't have to deal with audience in a way, really. I mean, you only have to deal with the audience in the sense that it's not interacting with the thing you made. They're only interacting after it's made, and they're looking at it from that vantage point. So I think we're gonna just open up the conversations around that, the live component of all this work.
Yeah, I haven't quite, I mean, that's something you and I are talking about now, but I haven't really been able to do that yet. Like, I don't know how, I feel like I've been sort of building this choreographic practice through video editing for a couple of years. And it's, it's always getting more clear. It's always changing a little bit and developing as I go. The closest thing that I've had so far to that I guess live interaction is I was projecting the videos that similar to I showed you on the wall of the theater that I mentioned where I made them, or there was also a gymnasium downstairs. I was projecting it like huge onto the walls, and I couldn't invite anybody in to see it because it was sort of like forbidden at that time. But I was like, I think this could be a thing. Like, I think if people came in there, I think they would feel impacted by it. Because I felt like I was kind of thrilled to see these videos, which had really been either in my mind super small or like just in my screen, forever. And then to see them blown up and like the entire gymnasium size, the scale was much bigger. And to my point about, art making be a visceral, physical experience, seeing it in the scale of that size was, it made me feel really different than watching it in the screen. So I hope that that's going to be something I can do more of in the future. But I just think anything, regardless of what form you're taking, I just feel like anytime you're creating something, if it makes you feel something different, or if it makes you feel something different than when you started, or how you woke up, if it gives you a different sensation somehow in your body, if it makes you think about something differently, even if it's uncomfortable, that I feel like is the most interesting thing for me, and I think to do that, it's not just a visual thing, and sometimes computer, like we're all so inundated in like the digital world right now on computer, and it seems like just like it's a totally disembodied visual thing, but in work like I'm seeing and how Lonnie's talking, and like how Callie, what you're doing, and Emily, like there's a way, I think there's always a way that the dance artist has to find a way back to the body. I think that's really the center point. That's where our consciousness is. That's where everything starts, and I think the challenge, I think, for everybody is to figure out a way to be living with the digital screen in some way, and find it relative to the body itself.
Totally, I agree. Yeah, I can't like leave my body out. Most of my work started with like a big like fight with technology, which was somewhat productive, but I think figuring out how to live with it is much better.
Yeah, and also brings to mind integration. It's like your audience, whether they're live or it's pre-recorded and they're watching it after you've done your decision making, recognizing their physical experience in the work, right? In the work, in the observation of the work, or if it's live, like in the same space as the work, if it's live in space, or if it's live in like this space, the observation from here, and taking that into consideration as you're creating as well, to allow them to have those connections, or make those connections, or kind of evoke those connections as best as you can. So then you're taking them on your journey with you. I wonder about that, if it's intentional of like a certain journey that you want them to experience, or is it more open, like evoking something, so at least in their history and their experience, are you allowing them space to pave their own path on it, be inspired to pave their own path on it in some ways?
Yeah, I'm curious about that, mostly because I'm making a piece that's going to be on Zoom, performed on Zoom, and in terms of their own path, I think the piece is supposed to, it's a mix of their own path and where I want them to go. And the way that I'm helping them to do that is to make some audience participation. It's a huge risk, guys. I don't know if it's going to be a good piece at all. I really do not. Yeah, I'm scared. So I'm going to try it anyway. But we're going to have audience participation over Zoom. Just leave it there as I shake in my boots. But that's the path that we're trying to help them, like, okay, I contributed to this and I turned the whole performance this way. I feel that. I feel ownership there. Yeah, it really depends on everything working properly. um, but yeah, I don't know if I would be interested in. Okay, I tried a Instagram live performance where I guess I was controlling everything. I'll just say it felt funny. I didn't know, I couldn't, there's no feedback. Um, I don't know, maybe Lonnie, maybe Riley, you've done it and you felt feedback. I don't know. Let me know.
I mean, there's no body language. There's nothing, like, you can't read anything in the room. I remember I did a couple Instagram lives last year, or earlier this year and last year. And I remember one feeling like, this is so weird. Like, I can't feel anything in the room. Like, because there's something so irreplaceable about being in a physical space with a bunch of other people in the room. And like every show, it feels a little bit different, and you just like feel the vibrations from the public, and it's like this deeply communicative thing. And of course, we haven't had that in a year or so. But there is something that I noticed in myself, is the feeling of like, I do feel that I'm being watched. Like, there is a different sense of performativity that happens when you press that live button. And then even if you don't know exactly who's watching or what they're thinking, or you can't read their body language or whatever, you can't hear them, which I think is important. But there was like, oh, like there is something, like just my own awareness of being watched is something that changed what I think it changed what I did. Like, I wouldn't have made certain choices had I been doing exactly the same physical setup of my room with the exact same music, whatever. But knowing that nobody was actually potentially watching me on their phones.
Callie, I would love to hear any sentence from you, because I know you've been putting things on Facebook, and sometimes it's live. And sometimes I don't even get to see it live, but I definitely have a different feeling watching some of your recent work than, let's say, what I just saw with Riley, which you're both solo-ish in a way. I mean, Callie often arrives as 20 Callies sometimes these days, if that makes sense in projection land. But it's still, it's one performer and their work. And yeah, sorry, that was just really coming in my head about, because you've been on there more than I have with performing.
Yeah, I'm at the start of the pandemic, it was a way to push myself to do something. And half the time I didn't even record it. I just like push the button because I felt the need I felt the need to have that some sort of like watched energy for a moment. There are times where you've never seen these videos I take. They're not public, but I do put the record button, which is different than not pushing the record button at all, which is just different than just being in the space by yourself and not being watched even by the camera that no one else is going to see besides you. Right. And there were points in time where I did this crazy thing. Don't ever do it. I mean, maybe if you want to have anxiety attacks, maybe do it. Is where I had a camera pointing to a space. I had a set of scenes queued up in Isadora, having the camera feed into them. And I had certain setups that kind of were there. And I was improvising to live music. So the music was happening, so I didn't know what was going to happen. I pressed the button to go. I went in front of the camera, did some things. I had it so it echoed a little bit, so I had some space of like going out of the scene and then going back to the computer and doing this, toggling all the stuff, and then running back into the camera again, then running back to the computer again. It was a nightmare, but I did almost feel like it was like this performance where I also had another screen open where I could see the chat. And because I could see the chat, I could see like the audience actually there and their reaction to it. And it was like bizarre. And at the end, I was like, man, I'm sore. What the heck just happened? Like because it was beyond just watching. It was like I was seeing them react to it. So it was almost the closest I ever experienced actual performance without ever having people in it. but it's that moment of when you press stop and you're just like, there's no one here. Like, really, there's no one here anymore. It's really weird. Yeah. So that was my experience with that. Lately I've been recording it more than not. But at the beginning I was just like, I'm just gonna do this because I have to. I don't know why. So I also want to make sure we have some time, I think maybe at this point to open it up to anybody who is participating in the Zoom land. If you want to ask a question, I guess you can use is there a raise hand thing or something? Or just pipe in. There's not that many people on here, so I think you should probably just unmute and just, wave and say hi if there's any questions out there or topics that you would like to explore.
Hey, I just want to say I'm really sorry that I came late, but I had a Budo class online that I couldn't miss. So I missed most of it. I just caught the tail end of Emily's, and I don't know if this is a question or rather just like research. I'm like currently in the midst of applying for a number of grants that have outdoor performances here in Montreal, and we're meant to create a video that shows us how we would imagine ourselves outside, but we're only allowed to rehearse in studios with masks. So I wonder if any of you have any advice. If you were to make a video imagining that you have fake humans around you and that you're outside, how might one go about that?
Can you film solo? For a grant, I did that. I held the camera and I did all my dancing. I set the camera somewhere else. And then a collaborator was a spoken word artist, and they gave me some already made footage, and I edited it to make it look like it was panning between her and I. But this piece is going to be performed on Zoom, so it already looks like a film, where it sounds like you're meeting, pretend that you're in the same space. But same might apply. Just go to the same park, like film a solo here, film a solo there, and then just cut between. I don't know. That's my thought.
Yeah, Danielle, this is a tough conundrum, I feel, because it seems there is not the opportunity for you to do like just filming work in the outdoor space and then of course build more in the studio, or like they're like, nope, we don't want to, even though that's the site you'll be at, we don't want to see it right now.
Well, okay, so I'll just clarify. The presenters come after the grant. So the presenters then set you up with a number of spaces, but you're not allowed to know what those spaces are until after you've received the grant.
So you know it's outside, but you have no idea really what the exact site is anyways. Okay, well then never mind. I'm back at zero. So huh.
Green screen? I don't know. Not that you really want to go down that path at all, ever. I don't know. Unless you have other people that do that.
Hire Callie to edit it for you.
I'm a horrible editor, by the way. I just don't have.
But she could make multiple bodies in the same space.
Yeah.
So she's your girl.
Danielle, I'll say this, it's just ideas popping up right now. Part of me just thinking like, what would I attempt if this weird request was occurring? One thought I had is to get, I'm so tactile. Like, I don't know. Like I don't know if these outdoor sites would be like, are they perhaps providing like a stage and you're going to be in these different locations in Montreal, or it's like, no, you're on the ground, you're in the grass, or part of me was like, well, I guess I could bring some of outside into the studio in some way and build from reacting to that. Like if you know you're going to get a tree somewhere, not that it's the easiest thing to get a tree in the studio, but you could get some kind of I think if I was given that and I was in a studio by myself, I literally would bring in like a tarp or something and put some dirt down or something so that I could build movement from that experience or the textures, because I know that is a big influencer when I'm out in public space. Like that really excites me. I'm on metal, I'm on dirt, I'm on this, like that informs just based off safety often enough. Yeah, I don't know. That was a thought. Pour dirt all over the Marley, just kidding.
Tina did it.
All right. Well, I don't know.
Well, I have a question.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, I think someone else spoke at the same time. I was thinking about what Danielle was saying, and that, like, for me also raises the kind of interesting question of like, when you're thinking about space, there's so much, even if you know where you're going to be, that you can't plan ahead. Also, like Lonnie was saying, like, you make the thing for the bench and then there's people sitting on the bench. And so I just am kind of curious if any of you want to speak to, you know, how you're thinking about space and dealing with those challenges that kind of, you know, things will just happen and stuff will come up, and you kind of always can't really know until you're there. So that balance between pre-planning and then also just having to go with the flow.
Hey, Riley, I want you to talk about your sculptures. I saw you do a piece and you were paired with Heather and you were like, yeah, yeah. And yeah, how do you plan for those?
Well, so this I can kind of relate it to Catherine's question as well. I'm an improviser. That's at the heart of my work as a dancer. That's my most experienced. That's the way I find my way in. That's how I find my way into movement development and creation and everything. And so with improvisation, I feel like I've learned from it that you work with what you have. Like you just work with what's there. And you can take that in just so many wonderful dimensions. One way is like you work with where you are today. Sometimes that's like where you are in your head, what your thoughts are, how your body feels, of course, as a dancer, what's going on in your life at that moment. Also what space you're in, what room you're in, who is around you, what the music is, like what material, what sort of tactile haptic senses are happening, like Lonnie said. And I'm just so fascinated by thinking of that as a choreography, that you, not even in an only dance context, but in your life, like you are always being somehow choreographed by what's happening around you in your environment. And whether it's people, social, cultural, physical, any of those things. And so to Catherine, to your question, I feel like that's what makes it so interesting, is as if you enter a situation that maybe you're creating for yourself, or maybe you're only creating yourself up to a certain point, and then you're going to let life sort of like hand you the other half of it, and just sort of go with it. Like let the impermanence of the situation kind of shape the way that specific time is shaped. Like you're going to be performing from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. and like that is the 1 p.m. of 2 p.m. of your entire life. Like that's the specific moment. And that it might be that one person walks by you and sits on the bench, or whatever. So the sculptures that, as you see, they're over there, I've been sort of taking that way of thinking about material. And so I've had these like 60-foot copper coils that I've been sort of carrying with me everywhere for the last couple of years. And sometimes they're performative and sometimes they're private. I think the private ones are actually a little bit better, but it's a way of like having my body grasp a material that I can shape with muscle and force in front of other people. And so all those things that I said about the way that I approach improvisation and think about that in whatever context you're in, it is informing the way I'm moving this material. And so it's like this simultaneous, like, sort of like metacognitive thing. I'm thinking about thinking. I'm thinking about my own thinking while my body is also feeling this material, grasping it. And then also while people are sometimes watching me do that. And so it's just this, like, I just finding like multiple levels of how to inhabit a space and how to leave, then when my body detaches from it, leave a trace of the way that my mind was working at that time and the way that my body was working in conjunction, with all of those things sort of mixed together. Like that's that's what you get, you know? Yeah, I don't know. Mariella, do you want to?
Hi. So happy I made it. I'm in Chile in this moment. And so half of my heart is in Boston. So I'm so happy I can talk with you. I have a question for all of you. It's super interesting. Well, I'm a choreographer, but I work in video too. And so with all this COVID year that has been very strange, our relationship with video and with the image and with our self-image everywhere, as artists, I think have moved a lot in ourselves and our relationship with our artwork and the world. So my question is about two things. One is related to our relationship with the time, because I feel that I mostly work in video, but in the way I control it, it's like with editing. So somehow I'm really connected with the past. So I create based with images that were recorded in the past. When you do a more traditional dance choreography, somehow, even though you are connected with the audience, you are repeating a sequence that you know it already. So somehow you made it through and you're connected with the future in relationship with the time. So you're doing the present, but somehow you know what is going to happen. Somehow you know the line with the future. And when you do live performance, even though you have some things in control, you decide which space you are in, you decide the costume you have, you decide some tools you bring, but things happen, so you are related to the present. So there is this kind of three different relationships with the time. And as the second question is related with this, how you push forward, because we tend to repeat ourselves a little bit, to be in a comfort zone. So sometimes we are dealing with these three ways of time. It's very comfortable to repeat what we do well, not to push boundaries, like to say, okay, I will try to do something new. Like if I improvise, not to move like always, to try to move in a different way. Or when I'm doing editing, to try to edit in a different way. So how we push forward and not to kind of like being related to the time and repeating ourselves as an artist. So those are two questions. Sorry, my English, I don't speak English in a while.
Who wants to take that one? Anybody?
I don't feel that I could necessarily take that one, but some thoughts came to mind, so I could ramble a little bit and really welcome anyone else that might have thoughts on Mariella's question, or two questions. Something that did come up in regard to different elements of time, Emily kind of chatted with me a moment and prompted about the most recent piece that I had the opportunity to play in public space. Due to COVID, there was an element of putting it on Facebook Live. And that was not something I was experienced in also with public site-specific work. And so there, of course, was the present, you know, during the performance. And it was a very different experience for me because I was somewhat I feel more like a curator a little bit. Like I didn't really choreograph that much movement as much as create a map for these dancers to get through. That was more important, was like, this is the site that you experience or explore this. And then we all make it to one spot and we'll meet there. I think with time in mind, there was some element of past in a way, because as soon as it came through the camera and onto Facebook Live, then anyone else's experience is seeing something that has already happened. And that is really just what is coming to mind for me. I'm just rambling about that new experience that I still, like, I don't know if I would necessarily want to jump into that post-COVID. Like, I love the present work of being in public space, and there's a lot to navigate just off of that when you're moving and sharing space with anyone that happens to be there. But yeah, I don't know if anything's coming up for anyone, but that is the trail of thought that started with me, was time and present performance, which is certainly what I feel most familiar with. And then as soon as it comes into digital space, and hearing you talk about editing as a past, you're in the past, and time is very interesting to me. So I guess that prompted this thought, is like, as soon as it's through the camera, I guess, is it in the past? I don't know. Callie?
Yeah, I have a very specific exercise I do to kind of prep work with live camera feeds. If you take a live camera feed and you feed it through and you say, I want a 30 frame delay on that, and then have it, projected back onto a monitor or projected back into the actual space, you are simultaneously dealing with past, present, and future at the same time, right? You have created, you're in the present, and then you're looking at the past, but at the same time, you have to be mindful of the future, because that's related to all of them. I don't know if anybody's had that experience where it's just like, it's a simple webcam, you stick a delay on it. Then you work with that as your model. A lot of the times when I do this with dancers is that, or anybody, you do it with like a public art project. And there's, you look at the Science Museum, it's the same thing. The kids go, and then they see it and they look at, oh, cool. And they go, look at that, and it's this feedback mechanism where like, you're just repeating yourself because you're stuck in this loop kind of past, present, future, until you could become aware of your effect of what you've done to what you're going to do. So then you can kind of pre-plan, if I know that, I can do this, and then I can repeat it. I can do this 3 times, and then the 3rd time I do that. So then you see it on screen, you see that by the time you do this on that way, you're doing that on the other, in the other layer or whatever. I mean, it's a very cool choreographic exercise, because it gets you to think about like the simultaneous nature of what could be in a video space, at least, or live and video space, depending on how you want to construct it.
I would say too, and jump a little bit onto Lonnie's, and in that maybe like as a pushing boundary or changing perspective, maybe it's a better perspective, because when you're doing Facebook Live, you're also framing it in another totally different way, potentially a better way. I don't know, optimizing it. I mean, that's what I would do if I was like, I'm going to make this dance look better, whatever that my choice of that is, through filming it, in terms of breaking boundaries. Gosh, Mariella, I feel like I'm surviving. I don't know if I'm in the market to push boundaries right now. I have to say that. I feel like my version of that has to do with other people sharing time with me, like bringing them into the performance, letting them be a ripple in my timeline. I'm more interested in immersive work, or seeing what their energy does to my sense of presence. But I like the metaphor you bring up is really like beautiful. I just don't know yet if I'm there. and if I want to stay in this digital space all the time. I'm really excited to get into live performance when it's safe.
One little thing about time as well. Like, I think that there's a certain amount of there's always a relationship between attention and time, and I think we feel that really differently in a digital space. That like people don't have the same attention span in a digital space when they do it, as they do in a live setting. And I think dance is a minimum of 4-dimensional art. It's not just a 3-dimensional space. Always dealing with time. Dance is always in relationship, and when you're choreographing in space, you're also choreographing in time. I think you can't not do that. And then you put it in the audience, put it in front of people, and then there's always that choreography of how the eyes in the public are moving, and where their mental focus, where their mental attention is directed, or how long it lasts, or how you make them think and for how long. And there's always that kind of I think that always has to be part of the practice, or it always is, even if you aren't directly thinking about it and crafting it. I think it's always a part of interacting, art or not.
Wonder if the space-time attention, there are moments where I see things that are pre-recorded and then they're streamed, and is there a different attention to that versus if they're live? It's on the same platform, it's on the same screen, but is there some sort of difference between the perception or the experience of it's like watching a baseball game, right? Like no one would watch a baseball game if it was pre-done. Like you want to see it live, you want to see if the ball go, and you see if people get their home runs or whatever. Is that component important, or does it affect people's perception of time even as they're experiencing it?
I think it's a thrill. Like you're wanting to see what's going to happen in real time. You don't know what's going to happen, and gosh, I don't know if everything that I'm watching is really live that says it's live, but I'm coming to it with a different perspective than I would if I was performing. Like knowing that I could redo a whole dance phrase that didn't go as I wanted to, that would be great. And I would take advantage of that. But if it's live, I can't obviously do that. So watching it, I think I put a different lens down when I think that it's live. There's more interest. I'm like looking, having been a performer while it's live, I think it feels more like I was busking, like someone could come in at the beginning, the middle, the end. I don't know. I just felt like I don't know. I've got to listen to myself. Here's my personal climax of the night, and I'm gonna, oh my God, I have no idea when they're watching. So that was more on the performer side, but when I'm perceiving it, like I said, I think I'm more excited and thrilled.
I completely agree with the audience perspective. Like I could totally have been lied to, but I definitely change when I think that something's live. I know that it definitely draws me in more. And I just keep thinking about control when you were talking, Emily, because to me, that's the difference. Like you're controlling something. If you're editing it, it's inevitably in the past. Thank you, Mariela. And live is living more in the present. So that's just what keeps coming up is, are you trying to control space? And yeah, I don't know. It relates back to choreography versus improvisation to some degree. And I think I'm really interested in some sort of blend sometimes, because in public space, I know I like to be rooted, but it's inevitably, I'm always going to improvise, and I need to ask fellow performers to be improvisational too, because yeah, that bench is going to be gone. I can't work with anyone that cares if a bench is gone. you gotta play and be excited about the new space you find. So yeah, I don't know. That's my next ramble.
I'll add that as a person who's been watching a bazillion things online because of starving for for art, when there's a live show, I'm definitely attentive in a way that is different because I may not have the opportunity to like literally hit rewind and rewatch something or skip forward if it sucks or I'm bored, you know. So and with a recording thing, I can choose to watch it at a time when I can space it out. I might notice that I have to go to the bathroom and leave. Whereas if it's live, I'm not going to make any of those decisions. I've committed to the time that I'm there. So as an audience member, definitely, I prefer, and I'm invested in a different way when I'm watching something, whether it actually is live or not. This is true, right? You don't know that either, but I'm going to take for granted that the people aren't lying to me. But yeah, and recorded things, like besides some really pieces that I feel really impacted by, I tend to watch them a lot more loosely than I would if I was in person. And I have a little bit of guilt about that. Like I feel a particular way about the way that I'm engaging with art in that way. And I think it has a lot to do with just the pandemic and in general, just feeling the way we're all feeling, like mildly traumatized, I think. So yeah, I'm also sitting in the dark, so I'm gonna fix that.
I'm going to introduce a thought here because my son is kind of obsessed with the VR experience, and for him, having that three-dimensional space available is so much different than having the two-dimensional space. And I wonder how, just the sense, we already understand that like being in space with regular people is a different experience than having a screen. But what happens when you introduce that screen in the three-dimensional realm? Like, how does that shift perception of space and attention in the performance? Is because you're free in your body as an observer. I wonder if that frees up potential for more prolonged attention if we have to live in the digital world. Yeah, it's a thought. I'm not sure there's an answer to it, but anybody want to speak to anything of that nature?
I mean, I think you're not constrained by the same things that you would be in a live setting. Like, although there is nothing to replace like the sharing a physical space with other people, I think there is an opportunity to it leaves the other version would leave space for the imagination to be expressed differently. Like I wouldn't do the things that I do on video, even though they're not in a VR, they're not in an immersion setting really yet. I'm doing things choreographically that I wouldn't be able to do in a live space, even though I maybe have I've tried to with choreographies I made in the past, and just like it hasn't been able to translate because I don't know, like you need, it's a different kind of constraint, I guess, I mean, sometimes it has, but so everything has its limitations, everything has its own structure. Like there's always going to be something that limits you from being this way or that, and like that's part of what you're working with as well, whether it's on the live space or on a digital space. Like there's always a structure around you in some form, I guess.
Yeah, I think you can, if you put live accompaniment, you get projection surfaces. You can send projection throughout the space around you live. I mean, that's a way to choreograph too. Like, boom, this light comes on and there's an image. It might be flat, but I don't know. Like, I'm imagining like sending images of yourself or other dancers like through the space. That's really, really exciting. Yeah, because then you can have multiple people and access the space differently, and move it off this flat surface in this one-to-one where I'm talking to the camera, three-dimensionally. I think yeah, that is really exciting. It takes a lot of gear and full blackout or night, but that's an exciting idea. And even you can do it outside, pandemic ready.
Interesting. There was one thing I wanted to touch on, and now I can't even remember what it was. And I think it had to do with compositionally. I mean, it had to do with the three-dimensional space, and it had to do with in a digital space, when you're dealing with digital space, whatever that may mean, it's viewed on flat screen for the most part for now, you know, until we enter into new realities in which I don't even know would be possible holographic things going on. And within that space of that screen, like, what are things we can do within that constraint that we can't do, that vision our like dream space basically, because it's a controllable space that's it's differently controlled than physical real space. Like, we can fade people out. That's cool. We can't do that in real life. Like, you can't be like, oh, I'm in the middle of, how am I going to go off stage? I don't know, fade out. You know, like, so we can have these kind of mechanisms to control that space where we can't do it in real life physical. So I wonder about, you know, what freedoms are presented to us by that aspect of, rather than constraints.
I mean, you have a dancer that never gets tired. That can go on forever. And yes, the transitions would be amazing, and gravity works differently. I just think that all stuff is, you know, it's not all been explored, but it's been well explored, well-traveled road through film. If it's going to be projected with live, that's where I feel like we're still developing. Perfect. You can have a scrim in front, you can have a scrim behind, it can be bent, it doesn't have to be flat. That's the innovation, I think, now.
But being in the space, like I'm saying, just in pure digital space right now. So you did answer that, but it's interesting to, you know, like, yes, in a live performance setting, if you have this surface areas, I mean, you can also film that, and that's another thing too. Is that what you were talking about, like having people in the space with digital projections in that space that is inhabited by real people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought you were, I know you were just limiting to the screen. I moved beyond. Sorry.
I'll toss in there, in the realm of just digital space and freedom. I think if I pulled those two from what you were saying, Callie, to me, what I'm most excited about in just digital space and the freedom is just the ability to be connecting or dancing or feeding off of each other and performing with people that are across the world from you. Like, so for me, the digital space is most exciting, and freedom comes just from that, just because I can see Mariella, and it's been a long time. But once we did this together. And so, you know, like that, that's, you know, I don't know at all if that's the realm of, you know, probably knowing you, I don't know if that was a realm at all of your thought, but to me, that's the most freeing and exciting thing, is to be connected with people and places that would otherwise not work in real time because I can't teleport yet. So I appreciate Zoom for that, or I appreciate digital live performance, or maybe even recorded. I don't know. I don't think I've seen anything recorded in this year yet where it was all about people being in different, I don't know. Well, we all know there's the, feed to the next thing. I can't think of the term choreographic video that I'm seeing too much of that has 20 people goes,
Jump cut.
yeah, that's not as exciting to me, but it would be more of the live interaction. Like, you're in a different continent, I'm here. How are we both interacting with whatever in different times, different spaces?
I agree with that. That's been nice. I got to watch the premiere of the Forsyth piece and then a fundraiser that Portland Ovations was doing at the same time on 2 different computers. And the music of the Forsyth piece was playing while my friend was dancing for the fundraiser. And so it was like this, and both were happening live. It's just like, I would never have been able to see both of these events if not for this. I mean, I'm in my living room, which is weird, but I also want to say that I feel like the digital freedom that I found is to rethink. I mean, it's enabled me to think about the choreographic process that I mentioned in the digital world more like painting than choreographing. Like, there's so much. I'm glad for the amount of dance that's happening on film and video right now. I think that's like the whole community has made really big steps in that particular form. I'm not as interested in seeing dance with like really glossy high-end cameras somehow. Like, I don't really care as much to see the body trying to be as clear as it would be in real life. Like, although I appreciate that, it's just not, I don't know. Like, I just don't really, I'm not as moved by that. Like, I'm more interested in like using the body in this way to, I don't know, not be constrained by the body itself, I guess, or to be constrained differently by the body in the digital form than like, look at how beautifully glossy and sleek and like a super crazy high quality camera it is. I don't know. It's just like, I don't find it so quite as interesting for my own stuff. So I like the graininess. I like the, to a certain degree, it's like that feels like a part of the material of like, let's not pretend like we're on something other than a screen right now, and then if it gets put live on the wall, like, then that's something, then the wall is the material that's part of it. And that affects like how, like what the, what the visuals are, it gives it's a different texture to the visuals somehow. Anyway, are there any more questions? Does anyone have any other,
Hello. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I had to keep falling in and out. It was my aunt's 80th birthday and she's the matriarch of the family. So it was like, wait, I gotta go to that Zoom very quickly. So I apologize. So today we had the We Create Festival tech kind of talk and process. We're in process. And I found out that we can film. We are streaming live from Hibernian Hall. And then I found out we can film at Hibernian Hall. And I know Callie's worked in that space. And I kind of am with you, Riley, where I'm a visual artist too. So I do in some spaces or in some of my visual artwork, I like the screen to look like paper. And so for this particular piece, I am thinking about, because we're streaming, I'm not necessarily looking to have a projection of like various shots as much as I might look at like, and I apologize, I forget which ballet company I'm referring to, but take Michelangelo's, the reference, the picture of what the body looks like in anatomy. There's a version of Capella that I was thinking about kind of using some of my sketches of figure art. And so I was wondering what maybe Callie thought about that, and also Riley and anybody else, just because I feel like we fall in the same place of really, really liking the high-end software to look like the razzle dazzle that Riley's talking about. And then I also like the gritty. So I'm wondering, I think it's a privilege to get to pre-film this particular piece. Daniela, hi, I feel for you because I'm like, oh yeah, in regards to like, so I think that's kind of like a, maybe it doesn't get filmed in Hibernian Hall. So just wanted to get thoughts of that. Thank you. And if I wasn't clear, I'm sorry, if I wasn't clear, let me know.
I say go for it. It sounds like you have a vision, and you have a texture. It's going to make your art stick out. Go for it. Yeah, there's something lovely about it looking like paper. I'm really excited to know if it's going to be animated, and with live bodies with it. That's like super exciting and layered. Go for it.
Yeah, and I think like more important like than the, you know, how expensive any of the material working with or what how much money is sort of around it. It's like with painting, like it doesn't really, like you don't need crazy expensive paint to make something really beautiful, because the point is your vision. The point is the heart that you're putting in it. You know, it's deeper than this sort of surface level of something. If it really has a message, if it really has like your soul in it, like that's really what people see, you know. I think, I mean, it can help to have what you need to have, and if to achieve the vision that you want to have, you need some really high-end stuff, then you need some really high-end stuff, whatever. But it sounds like, I mean, it sounds like that's a great opportunity to see what happens, try it out and see what happens, you know. Why not?
Yeah. And then I'm thinking of using, because I've had all of you guys that are doing this, I'm throwing this out there, that I'm thinking about using stretched canvas, like a real gritty look behind me, and then maybe just projecting gesture drawings behind. So that's like something to talk to Callie about later. Or any of you. So thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for your talk.
I just want to pipe in on that point of, you know, just if you come to the workshop tomorrow, I'll explain this in detail. Workshop tomorrow at 12 to 2. I'm sorry it's on some Easters. Sorry about that. Just be conscious of, I would say, just be conscious of the use of contrast and the use of like black white. If we have the sense of like when it's black, it's nothing, and when it's white, it's everything. So if you
the costume is white.
Oh, the costume is white?
The costume is white, but for a reason, because I'm looking to build value. So the choreography itself is very simple ballet. So the aim in the lighting and what the camera would see it, kind of build value while also showing the anatomy on one side. So I'm glad you said that, because Karen is helping me with the costume, and one of the questions she had was the reflection of which light, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that's why, because I haven't done lighting in Hibernian in a while. So that's why I said maybe it doesn't happen there, because I can't control
a lot of that. Yeah.
Right.
So lighting is everything, and make sure that your subject is going to stand out in your background. And if that means, you know, not projecting on a canvas, but projecting on like something that's gray or black with higher lumen projector, it might create that kind of like illusion of that. And you can play with how, you know, dominant each thing is versus having to be married to some sort of like white surface that you can't really do much about other than that. You know what I mean?
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. So I'm not, So that, again, I'm registered, I believe, for tomorrow. So I'll ask more. Thank you all. And anyone else wants to chime in.
Yeah. So with that, thank you, Cassandra. With that, we are 8 minutes over. I was never good with time. I'm so sorry. But this has been a wonderful conversation. I'm happy to have all of you, not just Lonnie, Riley, and Emily, but all the rest of you guys who decided to join us in this conversation. This will be available on Facebook Live. Oh, it's on Facebook Live, but I will post it, and I also have a link to the recording on. I'm sorry, I will post the recording on YouTube as well. So you can access it later in case you're like, what did they say? Oh yeah, or point people to the discussion. As I mentioned, this is the first of a series of workshops and discussions for Digital Live. Tomorrow will be our first workshop series, and we'll just be discussing basic cameras, projectors. What is this working environment, basically? What are you entering into when you decide to work with live digital media? And I just want to frame it as that, as like live digital media, because that's something different than like filming, right? It's somewhat different than that. And I just want to focus more on the live component, the digital component, the performance component there. So hopefully you'll join us. And thank you so much. I'm going to press the stop recording and stop streaming button. But you're welcome to stay on to say bye. So see you later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Callie.